I'll just do a quick introduction to myself and my role, and an overview of what I'll be discussing today. So as Jack explained, I am from Crown Commercial Service. I am the SME champion at Crown Commercial Service, which means at the moment that's a voluntary role, although I am keen that it should turn into a permanent post alongside my day job. But it means I have a responsibility for working on Crown Commercial Service's SME Action Plan, which details the actions we're taking to help SMEs to work with business, to be more successful in winning business from government, and advising on the other side buyers that call off from our commercial agreements about how they can address potential barriers to SMEs doing business with government, and where possible mitigate and better still remove those barriers. So I have quite a wide-ranging role, and it's something I'm really, really passionate about. If you could move forward one slide, Jack, please. I also ought to add that although the title of today's presentation is an introduction to public sector procurement, obviously I'm talking to you from the perspective of Crown Commercial Service. So it's about public sector opportunities through Crown Commercial Service. It's not necessarily the whole gamut of how you work with the entire public sector. So I thought I'd start by explaining how the public sector is comprised, so you know what we're talking about. Public sector organisations are those who provide public services financed by taxes and grants. And the public sector encompasses not just central government departments like the Ministry of Defence, Department for Transport, Department for Business and Trade, and others that you may commonly hear about in the news, but also the third sector, so charities, VCSEs, and the wider public sector. And that can include local authorities, arm's length bodies, and NHS bodies. If you could move forward again, please, Jack. Thank you. So there are some factors that we need to consider in public sector procurement that mean that sometimes we are a little more constrained than might be the case when conducting procurement in the private sector. But these are important factors and factors that apply to us that we must adhere to. So, as Jack mentioned in his introduction, there have been some significant changes in the procurement landscape that came into effect on the 24th of February this year, with the replacement of the previous Public Contract Regulations 2015 with the Procurement Act 2023. So we're governed by these public procurement rules detailed within what's now the Procurement Act 2023, and for existing agreements that have already been let, the previous regulations. And these set out how procurements are managed and the permitted methods for undertaking those procurements. Contracting authorities, or in simple language, buyers, in the public sector have to adhere to these public procurement rules detailed within the regulations. In addition, there are procurement policy notes, which some of you may have come across or heard of before, and these can cover a whole range of policy issues. Some examples that I've provided here are prompt payment, carbon reduction, modern slavery. So these public procurement policy notes provide guidance on best practice for public sector procurement, and crucially, they are the vehicle used to communicate new policies that have to apply to public procurement activity. And within those procurement policy notes, there is extensive information and guidance on how they will practically be implemented. Now, what I should say here is that we, CCS in particular, but the whole of government, recognise that setting and requiring evidence that suppliers meet certain standards to support government policy, such as modern slavery, social value, carbon reduction, in the supply chain can create and does create administrative burdens for SMEs. We can't do anything to take away that administrative burden. It's something we are simply meant to comply with, but we can understand the extra implication for you as SMEs. And that's why here in CCS, we've produced guidance for SMEs in the form of our monthly supplier specific series, which explains each of those procurement policy notes in turn, why they've been introduced, the impact on you, what you need to do, where you can get further guidance. And we're also working on producing a really comprehensive SME education programme in conjunction with the Department for Business and Trade. If you could move forward another slide, please, Jack. Thank you. So there are equally some principles that need to be adhered to, and I wanted to draw these out because I think they're really important principles, but they give confidence to suppliers in terms of how we conduct our procurements. So the Procurement Act remains committed to the principles shown here. They were principles in place under the previous regulations, and they've been carried forward under the new regulations as well. And they continue to place binding obligations on contracting authorities, public sector contracting authorities, to adhere to these requirements, enforceable with legal remedies for non-compliance. These are key principles that ensure fair and open competition when procuring goods and services, meaning all potential suppliers, regardless of their size, have access to clear information so they can understand the requirements and participate fairly. Qualifications and standards obtained in one jurisdiction should be recognised and considered equivalent in another, allowing businesses from different regions to compete equally for public contracts. All bidders are treated the same throughout the procurement process, with no preferential treatment given to any specific supplier. And of course, the introduction of the Procurement Act 2023 has significantly enhanced the transparency of contracting authorities' activities through the publication of numerous additional notices on the Central Digital Platform. And the Central Digital Platform itself provides one place to find that transparency information, which in its health, we hope will reduce a lot of effort, particularly which used to adversely affect SMEs, having to search in multiple different places. Again, if you could move on one slide, please, Jack. Thank you. So in addition to the principles outlined on the previous slide, the Procurement Act 2023 actually introduced new procurement objectives that apply to a covered procurement. And when I say a covered procurement, I mean procurements above the threshold at which the Procurement Act applies. So there are different financial thresholds that come into play that determine whether or not the Procurement Act applies to a particular procurement. For works contracts, so think construction, the threshold is 5,372,609. For central government non-works contracts, so goods and services, the threshold is 139,688. And for sub-central government non-works contracts, goods and services again, the threshold is 214,904. So actually, in some circumstances, those thresholds are really quite low, meaning that a lot of procurement activity is covered by the Procurement Act. If we take some of these objectives in turn, I'll expand a bit on what's meant by them. So delivering value for money is about ensuring the best mix of economy, efficiency, and effectiveness that achieves the intended outcome over the whole life of the contract. So that's something that we all need to take into account. Maximising public benefit is about encouraging thinking about how contracts can deliver greater benefit, such as by collaborating with other contracting authorities for a common purpose to reduce resources or costs, or considering social value benefits that can be achieved by the contract. Sharing information enables suppliers to understand the contracting authority's requirements, policies, and decisions, and this is absolutely crucial. And an area that we focus on within, our individual plans. And this is in addition to the wider transparency benefits embedded throughout the Procurement Act. Integrity helps to fight fraud and corruption and prevent misconduct to strengthen trust. And integrity has had a significant focus within the Procurement Act 2023 itself, with particular emphasis on addressing conflicts of interest and preventing any, unfair advantage. Where having regard to SMEs is concerned, there is now a duty to identify, mitigate, and where possible, remove barriers to SMEs doing business with government by reducing the burden of processes which are disproportionately burdensome on SMEs, or avoiding transferring unfair levels of risk to SMEs, for example. And I think, personally, from my perspective, I was really heartened to see that there is a specific procurement objective around that regard to SMEs. And that, coupled with ensuring that nobody is unfairly advantaged or disadvantaged, is a real coup under the Act. So, Jack, if you can move forward one slide again, please. Thank you. So some of you may be sitting there thinking, oh, this is all really interesting, but who are Crown Commercial Service? And perhaps I should have introduced this slide slightly higher up in the presentation. So we are an executive agency of the Cabinet Office, and we provide commercial agreements. So commercial agreements encompass a number of different things. They can be frameworks, they can be open frameworks, dynamic purchasing systems, and dynamic markets for UK public sector organisations to call off from. This means that the UK public sector organisations calling off from our agreements have a more simplified tender process than were they to run the entire tender process from scratch themselves. They can run what's called further competitions, or in some circumstances, they can direct award to suppliers who are on our commercial agreements. And in order to get onto our commercial agreements, those suppliers have already been through a tender process, a procurement, in order to be found successful. We have about 100 live commercial agreements currently, with circa £37 billion transacted through them annually. And we have in the region of 20,000 different buyers calling off from our agreements. I thought I'd just give you a bit of a flavour or a sense of how SMEs work with us and the number of SMEs that we are currently working with. So SMEs now account for 76% of suppliers on CCS's commercial agreements. That's, you know, enabling them to have the opportunity to win business directly with the public sector buyers calling off from our agreements. That's not to say that's the only route to market for them, though. And I should also point out that SMEs can access public sector business indirectly through CCS agreements as part of the supply chain to a prime, master vendor, or marketplace. SMEs account for 64% of suppliers that win business through CCS, and we cover 83 categories of common goods and services, including, and this is just to give you a flavour and by no means comprehensive, construction, energy, technology, print and research, many others. And we're free to the public sector to use. It would be remiss of me to suggest that this is the only way for you to work comprehensively and efficiently with the public sector. And we're not the only public buying organisation out there. We do have competitors that some of you may have heard of, such as the Yorkshire Purchasing Organisation, YPO, NEPO, North East Purchasing Organisation, but we are the UK's biggest public procurement organisation. So the size of the opportunity for you, particularly if you've not worked with us before, is vast. If you could again move forward one slide, please, Jack. Thank you. So it's important for me to point out that all suppliers of any size are welcome to bid for a place on one of our frameworks. Each framework is different, but as a general rule, suppliers must demonstrate how they can provide the goods and services required to an agreed standard. Frameworks are often divided into lots, typically by the product or service type, and dividing them into lots gives SMEs more of an opportunity and a chance of winning, as the requirements are divided up into smaller packages. Suppliers need to bid for a place on the framework before it goes live, and we assess all the bids received from suppliers and award places to successful suppliers before the framework go live date. Once suppliers have been awarded a place on an agreement, they can tender for work from the public sector bodies that direct award or run a further competition under the framework. And such public sector bodies will always be listed in the contract award notice as well. A closed framework, as opposed to the open framework shown here, means that no supplier can join the framework following the award. So once the procurement has been run, suppliers have been evaluated against the award criteria and successful suppliers have been appointed. It's then closed to other suppliers wanting to join during the life of that agreement. So it remains closed for the duration of the agreement. An open framework, however, which has been introduced under the new Procurement Act 2023 regulations that went live in February, is essentially a scheme of successive frameworks. Open frameworks are reopened, i.e. one framework in the scheme expires as the next one starts, to allow new suppliers to tender for a place on a framework. The scope of the framework, award criteria and terms and conditions should remain broadly the same for each successive framework. But crucially, what this means is that as an SME, if you weren't in a position to bid for a particular framework at the time that it first opened, you're not then cut out from that opportunity and from that market for the duration of the agreement, which could be, 2, 4, 6 years. You have an opportunity each time it's reopened to bid, should you feel that you're in a better position at that time to do so. Dynamic purchasing systems are deemed to be particularly SME friendly. And this is because suppliers only have to answer backward-looking questions about their past experience and not the forward-looking questions that would need to be answered when you apply for a framework. So you're not answering the award criteria questions when applying for a dynamic purchasing system. And crucially, suppliers can apply to join a DPS at any time during its lifetime, unlike the closed frameworks. This is really, really useful for SMEs. Typically, closed frameworks will have a bidding window of about 6 weeks, those that are let within CCS. And that doesn't always appeal to an SME's capacity and available time to bid. You can progress your application for a dynamic purchasing system entirely in your own time when you are in the best position to do so. There's also no limit on the number of suppliers that can join a DPS. You must pass sort of certain checklist criteria in order to be appointed to the DPS, and there will be financial checks. But even then, if you're finding that, for example, a Dun & Bradstreet financial risk score isn't met, there are other options available to you, such as obtaining a parent company guarantee. And if you aren't successful the first time in applying to a DPS, there is nothing stopping you applying again when you're in a different position, and you can take the feedback provided by CCS as to what may have prevented you from being successful in the first place. Dynamic markets are similar to dynamic purchasing systems. They've been introduced under the Procurement Act 2023, but they are wider in scope because they're set up for a wider range of goods, services and works. Just like a dynamic purchasing system, new suppliers can be added through the lifetime of the dynamic market, and suppliers not on the dynamic market can see new advertised opportunities as tender notices are published for each new procurement. However, only above threshold procurements can be awarded under a dynamic market, not below threshold procurements. And that I'm providing an honest view here. That isn't ideal, but it's the current situation under the Procurement Act. Catalogues, they are for items that can be bought online for quick delivery, and prices are updated regularly to always ensure the best value. And buyers will pay the price per item published in the catalogue. The low value purchase system was introduced during COVID, and during the pandemic, CCS received tens of thousands of inquiries from small and micro businesses seeking to offer their services. And to ensure there was a compliant but quick and easy route to market for these businesses, and to provide a simple route for government departments to make below threshold purchases, CCS established the low value purchasing system. It operates in a way that's similar to a dynamic purchasing system, in that suppliers can join it at any point and make use of a dynamic filtering tool to enable buyers to identify suitable suppliers. And to ease access, information requirements for entry are minimised, and the standard contract terms are a simplified set of headline terms. It's not recommended as a route to market for complex requirements, but for simple requirements, it's very effective. So next slide, please, Jack. I thought I'd give you a bit more detail on ways SMEs can bid as well, and I've touched on this previously. So CCS is currently working on consortia guidance, which aims to publish in the next couple of months through the supplier-specific series of articles I mentioned that are available on our website and LinkedIn. And this will explain the structure of the consortium, who should submit the tender, what details will need to be provided, and who should sign the contract. And the consortia guidance and the opportunity to bid as a consortia itself opens up opportunities to SMEs. Because we recognise that bidding on your own is a great way, to hopefully grow your business, and is obviously the ideal for a lot of SMEs, but it isn't necessarily possible in many situations, particularly if you're going for higher value contracts. So bidding as a consortia, where you combine with another SME or several other SMEs who offer complementary services to those which you offer, can enable you to bid for opportunities that on your own would not have been possible. And that's why we've got a big focus this year on ensuring that we have the appropriate guidance in place to enable more SMEs to feel like they're effectively able to do that. Obviously, you have the option to bid directly, where the services that you offer are a match for the requirements and the scope. And then you also have the opportunity to supply indirectly, as I previously mentioned, through the subcontracting route, subcontracting to a prime. And to find out about subcontracting opportunities, you can look on CCS's website and select search agreements. And when you find an agreement you think would be a good fit for your offerings, you can click on it, go to products and suppliers, and there'll be a list of all of the prime suppliers and their contact details, enabling you to reach out to whomever you wish to ask about those subcontracting opportunities. Again, Jack, if you could move forward another slide, please. So I just wanted to give you a snapshot, and when Jack and I were considering, what I would cover within this particular webinar, he and I thought this was particularly interesting. So I wanted to show which live CCS agreements have the highest percentage of SMEs on them. And you can see that there's a variety of frameworks and dynamic purchasing systems. You won't see the open frameworks or dynamic markets that I mentioned, because obviously they're newly introduced from the end of February. And the one at the very top, Digital Outcomes 6, is no surprise, because it's always had quite a low bar for entry, and deliberately so, in order to be able to encourage SMEs. And you can see in the specific number as well, over 3,000 SMEs. G-Cloud is absent from this, and many of you may be familiar with G-Cloud if it's the only CCS agreement you've heard of. And that was because we didn't have the correct information at the time, because the latest iteration of that agreement was very new, but it would feature right at the top if it was on here. Some of these agreements, the frameworks listed at the top, are not a surprise in terms of the highest percentage of SMEs, because of the nature of the services that they offer. So you typically find a lot of agreements for resources, and indeed for technology and digital services will have a high composition of SMEs. But also you'll see a lot of DPSs, due to the fact that they are more appealing for SMEs to be able to apply to. Jack, again, if you could move forward another slide, please. So crucially, I also wanted to show which live CCS agreements have the highest percentage of spend with SMEs, because it's all well and good having, agreements that are very SME friendly in terms of the numbers that are on them. But what most SMEs will be interested in is which are the ones I should focus on to give me, the highest chance of success. And so this is what this particular slide demonstrates as well. And I should say that this information was collated and accurate as of the 4th of February. So obviously this is an ever evolving situation. Numbers in terms of spend and spend with SMEs are changing all the time. And in fact, even numbers of suppliers could be changing all the time in the case of a DPS, which is open for new applications constantly throughout its term. Again, if you could move on again, please, Jack, thank you. So how can you find out about public sector opportunities? There are a number of ways for you to do this. And one of them is by attending Meet the Buyer events. So these will often be advertised on an organisation's website, on platforms such as Eventbrite, and on organisations' social media, typically through LinkedIn, sometimes Twitter, and also often on our behalf by trade bodies and associations. And these may be some that you've heard of, some that you haven't, like Tech UK, the Federation of Small Businesses, Made in Britain, to name a few. They give you a chance to meet public sector buyers and their primes, to understand the opportunities they offer and get help and information. And you can often network one-to-one with representatives from the buying organisations and with the prime suppliers as well. The future pipeline section of the CCS upcoming agreements page, and there's a link that takes you straight there, will be useful until phase 2 of the central digital platform is ready, because it will enable you to see all future planned CCS procurements, so for all future planned CCS commercial agreements in one place, and plan for those that you might like to bid for. And also, crucially, see the market engagement that is planned, i.e. how are we expecting to talk to the market, including suppliers, identify new suppliers, discuss with them what we have planned, whether it's suitable, whether you have concerns, suggestions for changes, etc. The Central Digital Platform, introduced under the Procurement Act, as I said, is a single place to access much greater transparency information across the public sector through several different types of notices that the buyers, contracting authorities must publish. It's built on the existing Find a Tender service. It's free to access for you as the supplier, and you can start to register for it now to see all of the pipeline notices in one place, track potential opportunities, and decide if you wish to bid. The pipeline notice is the notice that will give you advance notice of the anticipated contract opportunities with an estimated value of more than 2 million, which a contracting authority expects to commence during the 18 months following the 1st of April each year. I recognise that there is that threshold of 2 million, and it would be good if the transparency information was available for all contract value types, but this is what's been introduced to date. Contracting authorities must publish a pipeline notice within 56 days of the 1st of April, where spend is estimated to be more than 100 million in the year, and that will incorporate a lot of contracting authorities. The pipeline notice must set out the subject matter of what's to be procured, when it's expected to be advertised, and any other relevant information. And crucially, the publishing of the pipeline notices will give better visibility of procurement plans and enable you to track potential opportunities to determine if you want to tender. And it will be particularly beneficial to SMEs and VCSEs, allowing greater time to plan. The long-term goal for Cabinet Office is that the pipeline notices and pre-market engagement notices will be on supplier profiles by default. So when you register on the platform as a supplier, there will be certain boxes that you can tick in order to ensure that just by default you receive these notices. And it's really clear where the opportunities that you want to engage in can be found. If it's not clear which CCS commercial agreements might be suitable for you to apply to, you can always send an email to our customer service centre on info@crowncommercial.gov.uk. That email address will be provided at the end of the slides as well. And equally, if you find a dynamic purchasing system or framework agreement you want to know more about, you can email the customer service centre about that as well. The more clear you can be about your particular requirement, the easier it is to then route that inquiry to the relevant people. So if you entitle your query with the name of the commercial agreement you're interested in, that's always really helpful to be able to put you in touch with the relevant commercial agreement manager as quickly as possible. Jack, again, if you could move forward one slide, please. Thank you. So under the Procurement Act 2023, a register of commercial tools will be introduced over time, providing a single location where all frameworks, dynamic markets, and awarded call-offs will be held. It will be a publicly available tool, providing increased visibility and transparency, enabling easier finding and comparing of the active frameworks and dynamic markets, and providing visibility of expiry and reopening dates. Many tools and registers are to be populated using the data that buyers provide as part of the notices published throughout the life cycle. And the background to this is that government had received criticism that there are thousands of frameworks across the public sector, which I'm sure you're all aware of, some of which are duplicative, some of which come out at the same time. And that means that SMEs' bidding resource is stretched and they may not be able to bid when they want to because agreement bidding windows are overlapping. Having visibility of all the different frameworks and dynamic markets and all the different products and services they offer in one place will be really useful to suppliers and help them to decide where best to concentrate resources and where opportunities exist for other suppliers to engage with them to become part of their supply chains. And when this register of commercial tools is to be rolled out, it will be communicated widely to everybody. So again, if you could move forward one slide, please, Jack. Why participate in preliminary market engagement? Preliminary market engagement I touched on previously, so that's the step we undertake as contracting authorities before going out to tender. And a preliminary market engagement notice must now be published under the Procurement Act 2023, where engagement is anticipated or has taken place, or contracting authorities must explain in their tender notice why it hasn't been published. Typically, that could be, for example, Ministry of Justice or Home Office feeling that it was particularly commercially sensitive and would cause adverse consequences in doing so. But we expect the vast majority of preliminary market engagement notices to be published. In participating in the preliminary market engagement, when you find out about it through the notices, it will enable you to understand and feedback on what's being proposed before the tender is published and you've got no control. You can challenge buyer assumptions, you can shape and define opportunities, raise concerns, assist in developing T's and C's and award criteria. And by that I mean, I'm going through a procurement currently at Crown Commercial Service, and we have amended our terms and conditions around limitations of liability, insurance, risk, numerous other factors as a direct result of the preliminary market engagement with SMEs. And it's an opportunity to state what other innovation you can offer as well, in order that that can be addressed and incorporated within the scope. Let's not forget that new commercial agreements must give regard to SMEs during the design stage of the commercial agreement. And pre-market engagement will allow buyers to do this and ensure that that SME feedback is sought. Preliminary market engagement can take different forms, such as questionnaires through which suppliers asking which suppliers intend to bid. They could be whole supplier days with a presentation of the requirements by the buyer and proposed procurement procedure, and that supplier day will enable real-time feedback from suppliers and enable further discussion about the feasibility of alternative or innovative solutions. And it can also take the form of one-to-one meetings to discuss potential solutions, presentations, and workshops, obviously ensuring that, you know, any information or new information provided in those one-to-ones is captured and then disseminated to the rest of the supplier base to ensure that transparency and fairness of information. Again, if you could move forward another slide, please, Jack. Thank you. So contracting authorities will now get basic supplier information from the central digital platform based on the information suppliers have entered and maintained. So not only is the central digital platform under the new Procurement Act a place where you can obtain a lot more transparency information through additional notices, but it's enabling you as a supplier to input your core business information that you often in the past have found you are having to repeatedly provide in every single new procurement, which is not the most efficient use of your time. Instead of having to do that, you input it once into the central digital platform, the supplier information system part of that. It's held and stored privately. And then you maintain and update that, validate that, you know, the information held is the most up-to-date information on your organization. A unique identifier will be assigned to you. That means that, you know, call-off contracts that you win will also have that unique identifier associated with them. And when you come to want to bid, you're able to generate a share code, which is how the buyer or the contracting authority can obtain this core business information from you. So your obligation, crucially, once you've done that inputting of your business information, is just to simply ensure that you maintain that information and you keep it up to date. And if you could move forward another slide, please, Jack. So I thought I would end by providing you with a summary of different sources of information that are available to you, as a flavour of what we're doing and a flavour of additional guidance and help that is available to you if you're interested in working with us. So I mentioned the SME action plans. Each central government department produces an action plan that should be iterated annually. This will take you straight to where all of those central government department action plans are hosted, so you can see what they're doing to mitigate and remove barriers to SMEs and enable you to be more successful in bidding and working with government. There's the live agreements page I mentioned, so that will show all agreements that are in operation currently and that you may want to subcontract through, but it also shows the live DPSs in operation that you can apply to at any point. There's the series of supplier specifics articles I mentioned that give you guidance and an explanation of the procurement policy notes that apply, but also how you might promote yourselves, how you can go about starting to bid for government, etc. There's a 2-pager guide for SMEs on selling to government, very fundamental basics about what to think about when starting out. There's the link to the supplier registration service, which is where all of the dynamic purchasing systems are hosted. So where you would start your application for a dynamic purchasing system. And then there are some short guides to what the Procurement Act 2023 means to you specifically as an SME and what you should be aware of. And then finally, on the final slide, I've just provided you with 4 bullet points about what action you can take right now following this particular webinar to get started. From looking at the CCS agreements available to the further sources of information and who to reach out to within CCS. So I hope that's given you a good flavour of what CCS is about, what we're doing for SMEs, and what opportunities are available to you. I'm really, really passionate about my role as SME champion, and I monitor that SME feedback mailbox constantly. So please do reach out to me if you'd like more of an individual conversation or you have a number of queries that you'd like to discuss. But I'll finish presenting there, and hopefully if there are questions that have been raised in the chat, we can work our way through them. As Jack mentioned, any that I run out of time to answer, if there are numerous questions, I don't know yet, I will take away and provide a full answer to, and hopefully they can be published to those of you who've attended today. Apologies for my dog. And if there are any questions that I'm unable to answer, I need to either consult with colleagues or reflect a bit further, and I'm not able to answer on the spot. I will take those away and promise to provide you with a comprehensive answer in due course.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Lucy. I think you've done very well to get through all of that in that time. There's obviously a huge amount of information there, but I think the big takeaway for me is just how much SME businesses, which is obviously the lion's share of people on this call, are now very much the focus in a way that perhaps they haven't been in the past. And I remember when we spoke a week or two ago, you've actually got people in the office, human beings on the phone that are category experts. that you can just pick up the phone, which I think in 2025 is a good thing. So that's fantastic. It sounds like the dynamic purchasing system is a good thing for our business community to be looking at. And I suppose if you take away nothing else, get registered on that platform and start just getting a feel for what's out there. There's no questions just yet, but I've got one. So I don't know if people want to spend a moment thinking about anything they want to ask Lucy whilst we've still got her. I'm intrigued to know, do you find that there are sectors or even geographies that seem better geared up to work with the public sector than others, whether that be culturally or in terms of just a kind of outlook on these things? Or is that is there parity across the piece?
So sorry, Jack, just to be clear, so you're asking, are there particular public sector buyers or contracting authorities that make more use of our agreements? Is that what you're saying?
I suppose that would, I suppose that's half the question, but I meant in terms of the sort of the businesses that we represent as chambers of commerce. Do you find that there are sectors or scales or geographies that are better informed of public sector opportunities, or is that a myth that I've just created?
No, I don't think it is a myth. I think you'll find that because of the geography and the locations of Crown Commercial Service and certain central government departments, we have quite high engagement across England within the UK, but somewhere like Northern Ireland, because it's a devolved administration, and because we might not have a presence, is generally less familiar with the opportunities for public sector buying.
Right.
We presented recently in Belfast on public sector opportunities and working with Crown Commercial Service, which was very much appreciated by the SME base, but also by buyers in Northern Ireland, because it felt like it was almost sort of opening their eyes for the first time.
Right.
In terms of engagement in particular sectors, I think, in CCS, we sort of pride ourselves on the fact that we always conduct very extensive preliminary market engagement. And therefore, we hope that we are getting the message across in terms of opportunities, regardless of sector, as long as they fall within one of our 83 categories, obviously. Sure. That being said, if you drill down into the actual numbers, there will be particular sectors like technology, like resourcing, where there is a much higher level of engagement with SMEs and a higher number of SMEs on frameworks and DPSs. And I suppose to an extent that can be attributed to the nature of the services, and which are more suitable for SMEs. Certain agreements, like, for example, management consultancy or certain construction agreements may not offer as many opportunities, and therefore you may not see such a high level of engagement. I don't know if I've answered your question.
It does, absolutely. Thank you. And that's a neat segue into a question from Toby at Suffolk. Hi, Toby. Well, more a statement really. Did not see any construction or transport contracts listed. I think you're referring to that list of categories on the slide that showed the percentage of SME contracts.
Yeah, so I think what I'd done was probably, if memory serves, focus on the top 20 or so, just in terms of if I showed more than that, it would become impossible to read. Obviously, we do have, as I mentioned, around 100 live agreements. So construction, and forgive me, I've had a mind blank.
Transport and construction.
And transport are both covered. So they are indeed sectors in which we have commercial agreements that are open for suppliers to bid for and provide a route to market for customers. But probably in terms of either the percentage of total spend with SMEs or the percentage of SMEs on those agreements, they fall much lower down the list, right, which is why you didn't see them on those particular slides.
Understood. Okay, thanks. We'll keep questions coming. I've got another one here from Adi from Bowed Minerals, who's asked, We're a specialist aggregate supplier. We supply filtration sand and gravel to the filtration industry for swimming pools, etc. Trying to get in with places like Anglia Water, Severn Trent. Would this be an area you could give some information on?
Wow. So when you started describing what you provide, I was sort of rapidly racking my brains to think of which agreements that would fit under. And that would be something I would need to take away, because my day job is in the technology category rather than estates or corporate. But in terms of kind of local organisations, I guess, within the particular region in which you're based, we wouldn't have an influence over their particular procurement decisions. That being said, there may be connections that CCS have with other buying organisations. So it's certainly something I can take away and explore and come back to.
Yeah, thank you. I think that possibly because sometimes the utilities companies have a partial sort of public ownership, partial not sometimes. But I think very much in the case, well, I can't speak for Anglian Water and Severn Trent, but I suspect that would be more private sector procurement opportunity. Unless, of course, the government of the day decide to nationalise them. We shall see. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, if there's a more of an answer to that, that would be a good one that we could maybe feedback to AD after the webinar. That would be fantastic. Okay. Are there any other questions, whether in the chat or, I mean, you can virtually put your hand up, by all means. We've got Lucy for another 9 minutes, so no. Okay. Okay. Well, we'll draw that to a close then. Lucy, thank you very much for your time, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning. I know it's a busy day for many people. Could I? Here we go. Could I have the SME email address again, please? Yes, absolutely, Claire. What we'll do is we'll send the slides out after the webinar, so you'll have not only the slides but also all the hyperlinks and email addresses that were in the presentation.
But if you do have a pen to hand,
if you do, yes, go on. Let's do it the old-fashioned way with a pen.
SME feedback, all one word, at Crown Commercial, all one word, .gov.uk.
Really trips off the tongue, that one, doesn't it?
Sorry. Yeah.
We'll send the slides as well, and also the recording as well, because I appreciate there's some information there you might think, oh, I wish I could remember what Lucy said about the different categories and what have you. So we will we'll find somewhere to host that centrally and send a link out to everyone that joined. Last call for any questions from anyone, and then we'll bring this to a close. No? Okay. Once again, thank you very much, Lucy. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. As I said, Chambers East we're going to be looking to do more and more of this stuff as time goes on. So do keep an eye on LinkedIn and the websites of your respective chambers. And as ever, if you have any questions or comments about anything business related, your local Chambers of Commerce is your first port of call. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you have a good rest of the day and enjoy the sunshine.